Welcome everyone to the Cyber Lounge. I'm here today with Lianne Potter and Wendy Goucher. Lianne, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi there, I'm Lianne and I am a cyber anthropologist and a information security transformation manager. What both of those things mean is that I'm very interested in the human side of cybersecurity. That's the behavioral side, how cybersecurity cultures are made, how we engage with online cultures, and how do we approach ourselves being more secure from a human perspective. And that can be right down to just giving people the right knowledge and awareness, done in a way that appeals to their ways of learning, to their circumstances. But also, how does the organization that I support develop those communities in which people can support each other in an environment that's free of fear, free of blame, just to make sure that we're all on the same page when it comes to security awareness.
Fantastic. Great to have you here. And Wendy, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi there, I'm Wendy Goucher. I am my specialty in terms of being a consultant is that I work in the human side of security and also risk, which is a very human thing, and we have to look at that. But I'm very interested in using, if you like, the selfish side of people. We are programmed ourselves to look after ourselves, to look after our families, to look after our friends. And we can tap into that in order to create and develop a culture within an organization that, as Lianne said, is a very supportive one and a very dynamic and yet still growing one. So I think the age that we're currently at, the point at which we currently are, is a very critical point where we're going back. We are rebuilding the world of work, whether that's going to be offline or at work or a combination of the two. We are rebuilding this from the ground up. And this time we need to take along a human-centric view, not just as the person, the idiot between the screen and the chair, the common person to blame. Let's look in a more positive way at how we can engage with people in order that they want to and are able to improve the security within an organization.
Wonderful. So everyone who has joined, make sure to ask any questions you've got and I'll read them out for either Lianne or Wendy. Let us know that you're here and then say hello, or pass over any comments. Other than that, I think we should just get started. I actually have a question that I wanted to ask the both of you. So what, in your opinion, is the biggest human-centric cyber threat at the moment?
So I'll go first. And I am going to either make friends or lose friends when I say this. I think the biggest one is the cybersecurity team's own hubris. I think there's a lot around the cybersecurity professional thinking, actually, the reason why I do this is because I said so. So when you get these queries of actually, why are people doing the things that you don't want them to do? Are you really checking in on them and finding actually, are these controls impacting the way they're working? Is that why workarounds are occurring? Or is it because you're not doing that knowledge sharing piece? So I think one of the biggest risks is our own hubris as a team. We're not being that supportive environment. We are not enabling people to come to us and say, actually, I'd like to be able to do this, because there's still a lot of the narrative that we typically push out is full of fear, it's full of blame, it's full of, oh, don't do this because you will get into trouble if you do this. It's never, let me tell you why we're doing it this way and let me show you the consequences. It's always very black and white. And one of the things I always say is, if you ask a security team, oh, why are we doing it this way? And they turn around to you and say, because I said so. I always say back, that doesn't work for your kids. It's not going to work with your colleagues. So don't be surprised if this doesn't work out for you and people will start doing things, that they shouldn't be doing just because they're trying to circumvent your controls and rules. So I would say, actually, instead of the sort of typical answer being, oh, it's, the insider threat, it's this and that. Actually, I think we need to start with ourselves as a security team.
I absolutely 100% agree with that. One of the things I also do as well as consult is I write, and at the moment I'm writing about security awareness in the post-COVID age. And where I was last weekend, sat in my garden writing, I was thinking about mental health, because we're all more concerned and more aware about mental health because of the year and a half we've just been through, and trying to think around how can we avoid making people's life more stressful and more difficult by just dumping now it's all gone back, here's a new set of rules, got to follow it or else you're out the door, friend. Let's look at controls that will have a minimum impact on such that people will want to circumvent, but also that will empower people. Now I understand why I have to do that. Now I understand how I can talk to my mom or my granny about this particular risk. How do I communicate that? How do I communicate with my children about these things? So it's also about empowering, because we are in this beautiful position between the sort of technical view of security and people, the actual people who've got to operate this stuff. We have the opportunity to make that more positive and actually contribute, rather than just being security being the thing that never makes money and the people who always say no.
I just wanted to say hi to Rob Anderson and John Kelly and Daniel. Daniel actually said, great response. He agrees 110%. Daniel was actually a host on the Cyber Lounge previously, so it's great to see. Daniel also said, it also always helps to give context. I've seen a lot of scenarios where an ask is delivered without giving any context as to why the change is needed. Giving context not only informs the teams of why something is being asked, but also builds up trust between the teams.
Yeah, definitely. And what's the one thing that security teams want from the rest of the organization? What's that one meeting that always happens when we get everyone together, all from all the different departments, the engineering function, the architecture function, we get them all together and we say, okay, we've got a racy sheet here. We want you to be accountable and responsible for these elements. And then there's tumbleweeds, right? And the reason why that is because with accountability, it's the unspoken thing, is that eventually you're going to either have to justify your reasoning when something goes wrong, you're going to have to justify your reasoning why that's happened and why you didn't take the appropriate steps to prevent that from happening. Or it's kind of an unspoken agreement that at some point you are going to get blamed for something. So that's precisely why when you have these racy meetings, nobody wants to be accountable. But there is a way around doing that, and it is about building trust. And with trust, you also have to give people autonomy. Now, as human beings, we live and breathe by autonomy. We like to feel like we've got a stake in what we do. So if you give your people in your organization more autonomy to make these decisions, what you'll get in return is you'll get a much more engaged audience that feels safe and secure to be able to ask questions, challenge processes that they are accountable for. And once you get that sort of environment, you will have an environment where people feel they have a stake in it, and actually the process will improve, and you'll find more people putting their hands up to be more accountable. So as soon as you give people, you trust people, and then you give people autonomy because you trust them to make those decisions, they will actually reward you by saying, actually, I will be accountable for this because I know you've got my back when I've got a question to ask about a process, or when something does go wrong, because something will go wrong. When something does go wrong, I know that I've taken all the decisions I could based on the information I had. And it's all about that breaking down that gatekeeping, that siloing. It's about actually trusting the people to make the right decisions.
I absolutely agree. And in fact, a contract I was on a little while ago, we're beginning to bring in the idea that phishing is a huge thing. Phishing is a thing that organizations are really, really worried about, particularly with regard to ransomware. And I do quite a bit of work with government, often Scottish government, but in this case in the English government. And they're really, really worried about that. But NCSC say that phishing attacks are now so sophisticated, even experts will fall for them in some cases. So we absolutely cannot have a blame culture. So what we were bringing in previously was, if you click on something and you go, oh my word, why did I do that? This is so bad. Not trying to hide it underneath the carpet, because if you hide things under the carpet gets lumpy and somebody's going to fall over it. You actually want people to be able to turn around and go, I did this, I'm really sorry. I don't, it looked so real. It looked like it came from building society or whatever. I'm really sorry. Because then you can at least have a look at what damage there is, look at how to mitigate it, see if we can change the message we are giving people, see if we can tweak it. Attacks change all the time. Do our messages tweak? Not big, because you want to keep a clear big message, but maybe just going, hey, this is a slight change, there's a growth, there's a development, it looks slightly different. So having that engagement and having that if you like, it's not a good phrase for it, but report yourself. If you make a mistake, please tell us. If you plug something into your machine and you really shouldn't have done, please tell us, and we'll get somebody to have a look and help you out, and we can talk about what happened. And yes, it's absolutely trust. And one of the things that COVID time has done is managers have had to learn to trust their staff. I have worked for managers who have said, no, you can't work 1 day a week from home, because how do I know you're working? Mm-hmm. You could be sat in the garden and drinking tea. But now managers have gone, hey, productivity's been up. People have not been off sick. People have actually been working. And so we've already begun to build that. And again, we need to take the good side, we are now trusting each other a bit better, and build on that to go forward.
Yeah, exactly. And particularly with the phishing example you used there, yeah, whenever I'm creating a phishing awareness campaign, and part of that will be doing some phishing simulations and things like that, I don't want the reaction to be, oh, I've clicked on something, oh no, I'm going to get into so much trouble. I want the first reaction to be, oh, I've clicked on something, report. That's it. That's the thought process. I don't want them even to really consider the element of, oh no, I've clicked on something, just like, oh, I've done it, report, boom, get it straight out there, we can deal with it. The quicker we know about it, the better. So yeah, I totally agree with that.
The reporting being the end of the process, not the have you or have you not clicked on it. The process actually goes to, I may have made a mistake, and click on it, and then that's a step off point. It's not, look here, stupid, you clicked on something. It's so easy to do. Experts do it. If NCSC people tell me that they have done this, then I feel totally vindicated in going to IT and saying, I was really stupid. And they'll go, yeah, we know, but it's fine. Tell me what you did. And that's where we want to be.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So one of the things I do when I set up sort of the baseline for awareness training at organizations I work for is I do a talk for new starters, and it's called All the Times I've Ever Been Hacked. And I do it as a security person. I say, it's not about me going, oh, at this organization, we expect you to do this or that. It's just stories of all the times I've been hacked, throughout the years. And what that does is say, I'm a security person. I am not bulletproof. This happens. I talk about the consequences. So there was one organization I was working for, and we just all kept clicking remind me later about a Windows update. And then eventually, the reason why that Windows update was there, I mean, the whole organization was doing it. We just had this too busy face on. And, the reason why that they were asking us to do the update is because there was a vulnerability out there. But because we didn't know that, we just kept saying, no, remind me later, it's just an annoying thing. I've got a job to do. I've got a job to do that doesn't involve Microsoft updates. And what happened then? Yet we all got hit by ransomware, and we were taken out of business for a few weeks because we were a small organization, didn't have a proper IT function or anything like that. And so I tell that story and I talk about the consequences that it was for our clients, which was a charity. So it really impacted the most vulnerable people. I don't ever turn around and go, oh, weren't we stupid? It wasn't that. It was just life gets in the way. You just have to remember that we all have a part to play. And I think us as security people in this profession really need to highlight that we are not bulletproof, that we are human. And it's, again, all back to that human element.
And story. As you've just said, stories are so important. From being very, very, very small children, our parents teach us about life through story, whether it's in a book, whether it's as I remember, I learned a lot about managing people because I would listen to my dad when he came home from work, and he worked in the construction industry, and he would talk about what had happened, and he still does, and how people were managed and what went wrong and how they dealt with that. And it was all story. It wasn't a lecture, it was story. And we are programmed to listen to, and we all love somebody else's bad story. I tend to think that, you want a near miss, you want somebody's friend to have had that happen to them. Or you want it to have happened in soap opera. That's what soap opera's there for. That's what EastEnders and all the rest of them are there for things to happen and people go, oh right, we're learning. I'm old enough to remember when they did an AIDS thing on EastEnders, and it was massive because people were actually seeing somebody who had AIDS, who was not a junkie, who was not a prostitute, and it was the start of education. And we need to use stories as well when we're talking about cyber, because it isn't about streams of code as far as ordinary users are concerned. It is about them being able to put themselves into the position of the story that you're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if I put my anthropologist hat on, it's literally in our DNA. We are here as a species because of storytelling. And the reason why is because, you picture our ancient ancestors, they are sat around at the end of the day, a campfire. They are telling stories. They are telling stories to educate, to inform, to entertain, and to innovate, to share ideas, to move our species along. So that is the best way for us to communicate, because that is the way that has got us to where we are today. And in particular, I think that's where we fall down as a sector, because really on paper, if you look at it, we have an amazing story to tell. We have got heroes and villains. We've got heists. We've got goodies and baddies. Why aren't we telling these stories in an interesting way that will appeal to a wider audience? Why do we keep getting bogged down in the nitty-gritty details?
So I just want to read out a couple of we've had a ton of comments and questions in the meantime. So Daniel said he sat in the garden drinking tea, but he's also working. Ortega said mistakes are inevitable. So Rob said some security teams actively seek to highlight vulnerabilities without thought to the human factors. He then went on to say aviation sector has just culture paradigm. Sorry. And then he wrote quite a long one here, which I'm just going to read out. Only a very small proportion of human actions that are unsafe are deliberate, e.g. criminal activity, substance abuse, use of controls, etc. And as such deserve sanctions of appropriate severity. A blanket amnesty on all unsafe acts would lack credibility in the eyes of employees and could be seen to oppose natural justice. A no-blame culture per se is therefore neither feasible nor desirable. What is needed is a just culture, an atmosphere of trust in which people are encouraged, even rewarded, for providing essential safety-related information, but very clear where the line is drawn about acceptable and unacceptable behavior. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, he's absolutely right. The report no blame doesn't mean you're not going to find that you're getting a bit of education, or we're not going to help you. It's not about not trying. It's about helping, developing, and somebody might do something that they really shouldn't have done, and they should have known better, and they will know that.
Yeah, it's just about, as you say, no blame in its entirety cannot exist. And again, it's that black and white thinking. There is no place in what we do for black and white thinking. There is always going to be grey areas. And so when I say, without blame, I don't mean, blanket without blame. I mean, that shouldn't be our default, which currently it seems to be. In all the organizations I've worked for, as a security person, not as a security person, it's always been blame the individual first. And it doesn't look at what are the underlying causes to why this action is occurring. So we often think of security as more of a treatment rather than the cure. We're looking at this. We're not really looking at the symptoms well enough to be able to think, actually, long term, how do we fix this from ever happening again? And that's because we are shutting ourselves off as an industry in terms of people actually coming up to us and saying, I've done something. Once you close those lines, it goes back to, you see animals in the wild, the first Springbok will put its head up and look around and say, I think I've heard something. And then all the rest will put their heads up and say, oh, should we move? Should we go? Should we run away from this threat? Once you stop that communication, then that is when you're going to have a problem and something big will blow up.
So Jordan also has a question. He actually apologized for how long this one is. So he said, adversarial actors in the cyber domain are arguably both technical experts, but also human experts with a considerable understanding of psychology and its manipulative capabilities. Do you feel that organizations in the InfoSec/cybersec industry more generally are hiring and developing talent in a way that recognizes both these areas, or are we continuing to let attackers keep that upper hand?
I mean, I've always thought that the best salesmen are psychologists as well. Some of the best people who know about how to manipulate, if you like, people's needs and wants are salesmen. But also, yes, I've been in this business over 10 years now. And when I first came in, and in fact, for the longest time, being somebody who wasn't technical was well, yeah, you're only playing at it, aren't you? It's only been in the last very few years that I've begun to hear people saying, I'm not tech, I am an expert in this, like Lianne does. And, we are beginning to gain traction. And that is a very good thing, because it's not a good and a bad. It's about having all the talents at the table, not let's get rid of some techs and bring in some anthropologists. It's let's have everybody around the table and just get a bigger cake.
I love that. Yeah. I'm not advocating that we stop hiring technical expertise. I'm not advocating that we stop using tools. My sort of first big cyber role was working in the SOC as a SOC analyst for using SIEM tools. And boy, am I glad that the SIEM tool took care of most of it, so that I didn't have to actually physically monitor 1.5 million endpoints, because that would just been impossible. And that's what the tech side can do for us. It can make our jobs easier so that we can actually spot what are the anomalies, because that's what humans are good at spotting. But I think there are ways you can go about it in terms of your sort of next hire. I mean, we recently did a big recruitment drive for graduate trainees, and we opened it up to any degree. And I am so glad we did, because we've hired 3 absolutely fantastic graduates, all with a wide variety of backgrounds that are going to bring some really interesting things to the mix. But they've all done the technical training in their own time as well, because I am a strong advocate for the tech can be taught. And actually the human element is the thing that we really need to bridge that gap with. But there are ways that you can do it without actually going out there and hiring, anthropologists, for example. If your organization has a user researcher team or a user experience team, they have a lot of the same skills in which they know, what buttons do people gravitate to? What happy paths do people want to go to get to where they need to be? So if you can make friends as a security team with your user research team, then you can really start doing some interesting things. Like, how do you get that message across? And, what you get them to sit with other people in your organization and say, okay, just show me a day of a life of how you access the system. And if you've noticed that people are starting to write down loads of passwords, then that's a really interesting piece of information that you might not have gone without going out there and actually asking.
And communications teams are also valuable in this.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So I just want to address a question Shamila asked. She actually said 2 things. Shouldn't the old school ways of implementing security need to stop? And where people should feel empowered to come and talk to us when they're in trouble? She also said, one of the biggest things I have seen in the industry is organizations are often shamed in sharing when they have been vulnerable or compromised. It's often seen as a failure. I think it's very much linked to how we operate as humans in society.
I respect big organizations that come forward, and I've seen some who've had major issues during this, especially during this lockdown, and have said this is what happened, and it's very, very brave of them to do, and it's a very public spirited thing to do, but it's very difficult because all your stakeholders have got to buy into you revealing that sort of information. But it's very powerful, and it's what networking is about as well. Being part of discrete professional groups sometimes enables you to share information that you couldn't in the general way. But yeah, absolutely. Let's not all have to experience this. Let's learn from each other.
Yeah, one of the big things I do is actually, I look at case studies of how things have happened in the past, and the more we share about that, the better we are. We've got to be stronger as an industry. I think back to there's recently a journal that's been created, and it's for scientific researchers, and it's actually called the Failure Journal. And the reason why they had to create the Failure Journal is because academic journals only ever publish the success stories. And what they were finding actually when they did the research is someone will be toiling away on a piece of line of research for years and years and years, and it won't work. I mean, hundreds of thousands of pounds thrown into it, hours and hours of research, half of someone's life dedicated to it, it doesn't work. Turns out that someone else on the other side of the world is doing exactly the same thing that they've just started, but because we're not sharing our failures, that all that money is getting, duplicated effort, and I totally see that if we don't share this knowledge, we need to have a forum where we can actually say, yeah, this happened, but how do we all learn from it? How do we all harden our systems against this type of threat? It's the only way we're going to be able to face this in any meaningful sense is if we all work together.
Definitely. So Jordan said two things again. He completely agrees with the value in using storytelling and narrative-driven ways of driving awareness, education, and training. He mentions that there's some amazing immersive tools and companies leveraging this beginning to emerge now. Simeon Quarry over at Vivida, as well as the work being done at Immersive Labs, are a good example. He also says that he completely agrees with both of you regarding the tech side and how it's so important, but there does need to be a focus on blending and incorporating more non-tech people to bring that level up.
Cool. I agree with that. Thank you.
We also had Rob posted a link to what he was discussing earlier. So if anyone wants to check that out, you can follow Rob's link. It's www.skybrary.aero. So I think we're coming to the end now. So I think if anyone has any questions, we can obviously continue this discussion in our group, the Cyber Lounge, which is you can find on LinkedIn. So if anyone is not part of that, please do join us. We run events like this once or twice a week. We post various blogs. We have people such as Lianne in there as well, Ian Murphy, and so on. So I just want to give a huge thanks to everyone who's watched and everyone who's watching this later on. And of course, a massive thanks to both Lianne and Wendy for your time and expertise today.
Thank you for having us.
No problem. No problem at all. So I hope everyone has a great rest of the week and a fantastic day.